I have been inspired already. I mean, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. And we only arrived this afternoon at lunch, but participating in some of the conversations in the afternoon, it was inspiring me. So that is what I'm already enjoying. On this 6th of November, Charles Dickens would have said again, the best of times and the worst of times. The best of times 2015, the worst of times 2016. But also today, are we talking, is the outcome today, will it be fiction or facts? Is it stuff or substance? The jury is still out, and as a matter of fact, the jury is voting right now. You had Hugo van Meyenveld this morning as your wake-up call. I'm sure he did a terrific job. He is the public sector national coordinator. With all humility, I would say I may be the private sector answer in the Netherlands on what he is doing from the public sector, because that's what the Sdg Charter is all about. I have three subjects I would like to share with you. First of all, what is the Sdg Charter? Why do we exist? What do we do? And what is our impact so far? Secondly, I would like to give you my views on how ESG and SDG relate to each other. And I'm sure that a lot of professionals, whether it's civil society organization, academia or business, are asking that same question. Do no harm and doing good. How does that relate? And the third subject I would like to share with you is I will identify one SDG which is close to my heart and close to everybody's heart, I hope, which is SDG 11. And you all know even all the indicators which are linked to SDG 11, but we'll discuss it later. Let me start with the Sdg Charter. We created ourselves with some of the CEOs in the Netherlands from DSM and from Unilever, Siebesma and Polman, in 2014. I.e., we were already anticipating the adoption of the SDGs in New York in the 25th of September 2015, and of course the SDGs were preceded, the adoption was preceded by the Addis Ababa meeting agenda, which was basically focusing on financing, and followed by the Paris Agreement, but all are interlinked. And again, those are the good times to come back to Charles Dickens. So we created the Sdg Charter as the private sector answer to what was a public sector commitment. The philosophy we had and still have is the SDGs are from us all, by us all, and for us all. The universality, the indivisibility, the integrity of the SDGs are of key importance in looking at them. So we have now 250 signatories coming from all parts of society. It's business, knowledge institutes, NGOs, business, of course. And we have a steering committee which is composed of Global Compact, and Coralie sitting over there. We are both member of the board of Global Compact. As a matter of fact, Coralie is only 3 months, and for her colleagues in Elsevier, in Welex, she had already made a big impact. So I think welcome to the board of Global Compact. So it's Global Compact. It is MVO the Netherlands. For the fijnproevers in the Netherlands, you know whom I'm talking about. The Maatschappelijke Alliantie, or the Major Alliance, which is a group of leading philanthropies in the Netherlands. Partos, which is a group of the leading NGOs, particularly social NGOs. IUCN, in itself a platform very much focused on conservation of nature. The Nationale Jeugdraad, the National Youth Council, because, I mean, as you can see, I'm a senior citizen and we all do it for them. So they must be at the table. They don't want to face with the legacy which I have left, we have left. Then we have the academic institutions, NWO VOTRO, for the Dutch people in the room. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs, because it's for us all, which includes the ministries as well. And as Hugo has undoubtedly explained to you this morning, it's an anomaly that the coordination for the national implementation of the SDGs in the Netherlands is organized within the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I mean, it's very strange, but hopefully at some point in time we're going to change that. By the way, he is very effective nevertheless. And the last one is the Association of Dutch Municipalities. And I'm coming back on my SDG 11 later. The objective and the purpose of the Sdg Charter is to, first of all, help create partnerships, and particularly unusual ones, multi-stakeholder, the Dutch tradition, of which I will explain one in Sdg 11. So create partnership of civil society, the government, and also the business, of course. And blended finance is one of those subjects which we are clearly focusing on, because that would be the perfect way of particularly implementing the SDGs, I would say, in the global south, because that's where the big issue is right now. We say it's universal, but the temptation to say, well, we in the Netherlands or in the UK or in Italy, we do it in our own front yard. Let's not forget we have a duty to ourselves, an ethical obligation, I would say even, but also self-interest, that we realize the SDGs also in our international value chain. So that's one, and the other objective of the Sdg Charter is the promotion of the SDGs. And my favorite saying is here, we need to be smarter, we have to speak louder, and we have to push harder. I was with Tessa in the ISEC meeting, and I was complaining, and I was a student leader in my days, in the 60s. I was complaining why the students are not more vocal in the implementation, as a student, as a consumer, in the implementation of the SDGs. Because it's a disgrace how we deal with nature, how we deal with injustice, and how we are, with all the resources we have, with all the wisdom we have, that we apparently do not have the collective will to implement the SDGs, the triple I, as we were discussing at lunch. So the essence of the Sdg Charter is from awareness to impact, from words to numbers. And I think that's something which I would like to leave with you. During lunch, we also discussed SDG washing. Maria, my wife, typically keeps me far away from the washing machine. But I may be some drying, but the washing, don't touch it. I'm not so against SDG washing. I know it's an issue which is often raising eyebrows with civil society organizations, but I think if companies are professing or even promising in their annual report on the website, we go for 2 or 3 or 4 SDGs, I would say good for you. Because first of all, before you publish that, even if it is a washing exercise, there was a discussion at the board level. And we all know that the young professionals and many other professions in an organization are much ahead in these type of things than the board often is. So if a board is putting its signature below under the annual report, and that's the managing board and the supervisory board in our dual tier system, it is something which I think is quite helpful. As Marcia was saying, I was very much involved in the creation of GRI. In 2001, GRI was an idea, I would say an idea in a garage. That's the way it developed in Silicon Valley. But it was an idea which came to the Netherlands. And 14 years later, we had a law in Brussels, completely arranged by civil society on a due process, multi-stakeholder. Governments only provided the funding. It was us, civil society and business and knowledge institutes working together in creating a law. So it can be done. And I can assure you, in the early days of sustainability, of sustainability reporting, a lot of people were asking, I mean, it's costly, it's too complicated, I don't have the expertise, so why should we? Well, we did it. And one of the outcomes of this GRI was the development of a materiality matrix. And in a sense, in one of the exercises, we had 3, or I think where's the group sitting at the table, did exactly the materiality matrix. On the axis, the x-as, so to speak, we put the benefit to the company, and on the ordinate, the y-as, we put the impact on society. I mean, when I read an annual report, the first page, or a sustainability report, the first thing I'm looking at is the materiality matrix. What is, after intensive and extensive consultation with your own stakeholders, which is civil society organizations, customers, even NGOs, what is relevant for the society, for the stakeholders and for society, what is relevant for the company. And of course you want, in the end, everything to be in the northeast corner. But maybe not, because we don't want to be a perfect world. How boring would that be? Another thing which relates to this issue of what I'm discussing is ESG and SDG. Some people say we're moving from ESG to SDG. I would submit to you we're talking about ESG and SDG. As Marcia was referring to, have been quite active in the OECD guidelines, which is typically the do no harm agenda in the value chain of a company, in the entire value chain, which already was an extension of the responsibility of companies. And that means that companies have to do their due diligence in their value chain, whether there's no real or potential harm done to anyone of the stakeholders or society. And that was until, I would say, 2 years ago, say the basic paradigm by which companies, ESG-based, were linking themselves to our agenda. With the SDGs, something important has happened. Because we now we completed the circle. We not only have ESG baselines, i.e. OECD guideline, UN guiding principles, but we also have a positive outlook. What needs to be done in society? Not the ultimate responsibility of business, but the business will play a role in that. How can we create a better world? Because in a better world, no one can thrive, including business. If you talk about pension funds or large corporations or even SMEs, I sometimes say nothing is impossible, particularly if it's inevitable. Well, this agenda is an inevitability for us to be realized by 2030. And that means that for me, ESG and SDG are logically together. ESG is a responsibility and an accountability of business in their value chain. But the context is within which that takes place has been created by the SDGs. We had last week a very interesting discussion, and again, this is for the Dutch fijnproevers, within the World Connectors about the climate accord, which is currently being negotiated here between the government, the business and civil society organization. And we heard from some of the participants that there was a lot of hurry, there was a lot of pressure, there was a lot of irritation, because now in the final stages of negotiating that climate accord, the bill needs to be presented and accepted by some of the participants, and those are the difficult. I mean, the last stage, I would say it's maybe the last 5% of Mrs. May in the Brexit, the most difficult one which you're facing. And then we were discussing, I mean, shouldn't we have a timeout with these negotiations under severe pressure? And shouldn't we look at the opportunity which the climate accord will create for business? Because the business, of course, don't want to pay for it. And that was an opening to say, well, let's take the time to reflect on what climate change can do for the competitiveness of business internationally. If you are a front runner in climate change or in greenhouse gas emissions, in your own value chain, you can create a competitive advantage. The whole perspective by which you're sitting at a table to negotiate a deal becomes different, because you're not looking at expenses or taxes, you're looking at an opportunity which you're creating. There's a very interesting report which I would like you to look at, which was published in 2017 in January. So it's already 1.5 years old, but it doesn't get that much attention. which is written by the Business for Sustainable Development Commission, and it's called the Better Business, Better World report. It has identified, it's a very interesting report, it has identified 4 high added value systems which have been shown there with collectively 60 hotspots, and a business potential to be realized on an annual basis in 2030 of $12 trillion per annum. Now maybe it doesn't say that much, but if you consider that right now the gross national product on a global basis is 80 trillion, and by 2030 maybe 110, 120, you can see already that 10% is incremental business potential by implementing the SDGs. If I translate that into a Dutch perspective, our gross national product right now is 1% of gross national global product. With the wisdoms, with the knowledge, with the money, with the work together with all stakeholders, we should get at least 1.5% of that incremental business volume if we do it together. So the upside potential for business in the Netherlands is fantastic. Now, if you put that into perspective, there is a long-term perspective of incremental benefits to the companies, to the national economy, to hire talent. Because you realize in the SDGs, you can imagine that offers a positive outlook. And we have seen too few of those studies, because this Better Business, Better World report has not yet been translated into national initiatives. I said it before here in the corridors, it's a pity that the UK is distracted with Brexit, otherwise we would have terrific partnerships with the UK to see how can we bring this as a very positive driver, as a positive driver to realize the SDGs. So the positive perspective of the SDGs are extremely important. In this context, and the team was asking themselves, they didn't ask me, why, when we were plotting our favorite SDG on the pineapple, or in the pineapple approach, and I put one, well, it's not there, but I put one here. Now, everyone has I always have a discussion with Hugo van Meijenveld, who says, well, Herman, the SDGs conscientiously have a prime number because it can only be divided by itself. In other words, it's indivisible, either by 17 or by 1. I said, Hugo, this is too implicit. I have my own SDG 18. I'm playing golf, so I need the 18. Otherwise, how can I go to hole number 19? As the golf players here know. And SDG 18 is leave no SDG behind. Because that's the risk we are running, that companies are focusing on 2 or 3 SDGs and then do not capture the full potential of the other SDGs, or doing harm on 1 or 2 of the other SDGs. So there is a connection. My last comments are related to SDG 11. And as a matter of fact, in this Better Business, Better World report, there are the 4 high added value systems are: 1, health and well-being. Well, RELX is quite active in that. Energy and materials, food and agriculture, and cities. And many of you know the book of Benjamin Barber, If Mayors Would Rule the World. I think if you want to get action, implementation, the triple I discussed at lunch, maybe the best venue for delivering on all the SDGs is going to the cities. Because that's where the issues are. Not in Downing Street 10 or in a Touring here in the Netherlands or in the Élysée in France, or in the White House for that matter. It is in the cities. And it is, I'm talking now about our cities, but if you see what's going to happen in the urbanization, the migration from the rural areas because of lack of potential, lack of perspective to cities. I think right now 30% of the world population of 7 billion is living in cities. But by 2050, so much for the legacy of the millennials in this room, 70% may be living in the cities. And many of those are migrants, and many of those are poor, and many of these are living in the worst possible conditions. Many of them have no rights, and many of them are a source of conflict. So cities is a very important, and there's a lot of talk about smart cities, which of course is a perfectly valid development, but we have created, and I mean the CEO of AkzoNobel, the previous one, Ton Buchner, we have created 2 years ago the Human Cities Coalition. So it was created by the CEO of AkzoNobel. Every CEO has its, as we say in Dutch, it has its dingetje. It's a typical Dutch word, but they all want to have something where they can be, in the public domain, be recognized as standing for. And for Ton Buchner, this was the Human Cities Coalition, a cooperation between civil society organizations, a partnership under Sdg 17 of the classic nature. I mean, knowledge institutes, universities, civil society organizations, financial sector, and business. Why did it become a dingetje for the previous CEO of AkzoNobel? AkzoNobel, as you know, they are in paint and coatings. They are active in Brazil. And they decided at some point in time, 4 years ago, to start, out of the foundation, to start painting or providing paint to the people in the favelas. So these poor people, you've seen the pictures, maybe you have been there, were painting their houses. And interesting enough, it served well-being. Suddenly, with all the paint, it became a better livable area. But then it got out of hand, because one of the unintended consequences was that those people who painted their houses started social, just enterprises, and started to paint other areas in Rio de Janeiro. In other words, by just creating something out of a foundation, it became a business case, not for AkzoNobel, maybe a little bit, but not necessarily. But you created a local economy which was then exporting its skills into other areas of Rio de Janeiro. And that was the reason why Ton Buchner, the CEO of AkzoNobel, said, I want to test more of this. So we have, with the support of the Dutch government, we have been looking together with an organization, Slum Dwellers International, which is an international organization dealing with the plight of slum dwellers. What can we do in certain neighborhoods in Jakarta and Manila? And if you look at those neighborhoods and go into it, and you start a needs assessment, and you start to engage with local communities, women in particular, because they know exactly what's happening in those neighborhoods, more than men, you create excitement, you create cooperation, you create the identification of priority issues. It's electricity, it's health, the risk of subsidence in Jakarta. I mean, the soil is sinking, the water is rising, typically where the slum dwellers are living. What can we do to help you? Infrastructure projects which are being developed there should take these considerations very much into account, which so far has not been done. So here's a potential for construction companies and engineering firms. Sdg 11 encompasses all of the SDGs. As Sdg Charter, we're going to have a bus tour in the Netherlands to bring the SDGs in quite a number of cities, to outreach to local population. For those in the Netherlands, I mean, one of the prime SDG municipalities in the Netherlands is the municipality of Os. Os is a very interesting, because the municipality was severely affected by the closure of some businesses in 2014, 2015. The mayor, who was from an entirely different political party than the local population, said the SDGs are providing me the narrative to bring everyone together. That's what's happening. The municipality, the people there, live the SDGs. I think it's a good example of how you can bring the SDGs alive. I have a question to you. Would you mind standing up? I mean, it's the end of the day. Maybe you want to stand up after my speech anyhow, but would you mind standing up? Let me first say, what I'm going to ask you is something I did in a room with 1,000 people. I know it because the fire department didn't allow more people in that room. And I had a simple question to everyone, and which I ask also to you. Think of a sport which begins with a T. And if your first thought is tennis, please sit down. If it is table tennis, the answer is correct, but please sit down. Okay. Before I ask my next question, I did this in, as I said, in San Francisco, and there were only, you're smarter, because you're smarter than, so far, than the big room in San Francisco, because there were only 3 people standing, and then someone of the 3 sat down because, are you sitting down, Tessa? For sitting down, say something's going to happen. So there were only 2 left. So, can I ask each of you what you're thinking of, Tessa?
Yeah, I thought maybe I comes sport. I thought triathlon.
Good answer. Anyone else who has triathlon? Please sit down. I mean, it's a good answer. What are you thinking of? What is that? With a T. Okay. So I may not have been clear enough. What is your answer? Yeah? Very good. Marcia. You may sit down. You have a good answer. Marcia. Yeah? Never heard of that one, but it sounds very exciting. Okay. What do you think? Climbing. There was one Pakistani who was in my audience. He was also one of the last ones standing there, and he had a very smart answer. I thought I had never heard of that one at that point in time. He said, "Well, cricket." And he really was thinking out of the box because we start. He said, I asked him why. He said, "Well, when we play cricket, we start with a cup of tea." Now, no one had my answer. Neither have you given the answer which I had in mind. As a matter of fact, I've mentioned already in my speech about some of my favorite sports, which I'm thinking of. Maybe you haven't listened to me, only that's fine after a long day. Golf. Golf. What I want to point out here, are we speaking the same language? Or even more important, do we understand each other? That's the power of the SDGs. That's the power of this afternoon. Thank you very much.